Hello everyone, this is Persephone and I'm making this video while coming at the same time on a different side because I have to utilize all of my time since now I have multiple jobs. And today I want to discuss with you why I would never ever again date a gamer in my entire life. That having a gamer boyfriend or husband is the worst thing that can happen to you as a woman. It's going to ruin your life. And for me, it's like dating someone who's addicted to meth or crack, but it's less obvious. And if in society you have a drug addict husband or boyfriend, people will show support. But if he's a gamer, no one is going to show support. You're going to live in shame, isolation, and total failure. So actually, I have been married in the past, not only to just one, but two gamers because, yeah, I didn't have the best taste in men back then. And things descended so rapidly that I have to say that the reason these marriages failed were probably 70% because of gaming. It was that bad. And the reason for that is because once a guy starts to play games, it's a slippery slope and it escalates and eventually takes over his life. It takes over adult responsibilities, work, paying expenses, and all of that. And the woman in his life becomes an afterthought. If you don't believe me, you don't even have to take my word for it. You can just look up online. There are even support groups of wives of gamers. That there are support groups for cancer, there are support groups for infant loss, and then there is a support group for the fact that your partner is a gamer. You can understand how bad this is. So in the first time, my first ex was a psychiatrist and he got into a guild where he was actually playing with people in a real time, like multiplayer game. And my entire life had started to actually revolve around the game. That if I wanted us to go for a walk, we couldn't because he had to go on a raid. If I wanted to spend money, we couldn't because he had to buy items. And he was constantly ignoring me. And I tried to play with him, but he didn't want me there. So it was constantly yelling on the headphones. And he put on a lot of weight because he was sedentary. He would come home from the hospital and he would just game. And eventually, I had to tell him that we need to go to marriage counseling because this is not sustainable, and he didn't want to go. And at some point, they said, I had to put my foot down and set an ultimatum, and I said, me or the games, and he chose the games, and we got divorced. And he actually didn't expect me to divorce him over that. There were other problems, but that was a major one. And he wanted to go to marriage counseling after I filed for divorce, but after that point, I didn't want to go anymore. I felt that I've tried everything that I could and it was unsustainable. The second case that was less obvious was my second ex, who was Korean American. I mentioned being Korean not because I'm a racist and not because this applies to all Korean men. It does not, obviously, but because there are specific, very cancerous elements in Korean culture, especially traditional, and I'm not afraid to say that enable these behaviors. So when I had met him, I considered myself more mature, and when you have been divorced once, the concept of why did you get divorced comes up on the first dates. And I told him that I'm so traumatized from what happened with the previous games that I don't want to date someone who's into games. That if you play games more than recreationally, like let's say in the weekend with your friends, then there's no point continuing. And he reassured me that that's not the case, that he's also into self-development, that he used to be an athlete, blah, 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 and that it's not going to be the same. And he was right. It was not the same. It was 10 times worse with the Korean guy. And I'm going to be very graphic here. If you're disgusted, you can skip this part. He was so addicted that he would keep bottles under his desk so he can pee inside and he doesn't have to use the time to go to the bathroom and waste from the game. With this person, I had lost my dignity, my self-respect. 3 months into the marriage, I realized that I had made a huge mistake. The piece bottles that they were gathering under the desk were also a reminder of that. I started doing OnlyFans and other things to keep us afloat because obviously he couldn't hold down any job for long enough because games weren't his job, his passion, and his mistress. They were his God. There are women who say they were 3 into the marriage, like me, my husband, and the drugs or the alcohol. I have to say I was in a cult with games being the God and him and his friends being the brain dead followers. And people have some respect for you, like I said, when you're in an unfortunate situation, but then people say, why don't you just leave? And on top of being a gamer, he also had ADHD and he was a covert narcissist. And if you know anything about ADHD, you know how much they can get hooked up on games. So I was really having so like non-existent self-esteem, and I was trying to cope. And eventually, this is years since this happened, I started to ask, why is this my shame to internalize? Am I the one who is worshiping the games? So now I consider, and I'm making this video, eventually we did end up breaking up with this person. I'm going to analyze on further videos if you want to watch, but I'm going to tell you that I consider gaming an extremely self-destructive habit that also ruins your family as much as alcohol and drugs. I consider it the #1 red flag of a failed man, because if a man plays games all the time, he's bound to be fat, he's bound to not make any money, and he's bound to just neglect everyone else around him, including his own children if he had any. We didn't have children. I didn't have children with any of these men, and I'm happy because they would be neglected and fatherless. And it's very traumatizing for a child when your father is physically present but emotionally absent because all of his attention is in a game. And I'm never again going to put myself into the company of anyone who plays games. If you play games, I'm blocking you. I'm going no contact with you. That's just how it is. I'm that traumatized. And I think society needs to talk more about that. I had made a video in the past and people had become very defensive and saying that I'm overreacting. I'm not. These addicts don't realize addicts are the most selfish people on the planet. They are going to throw you under the bus for their addiction to get their fix. And I believe that it's very underrepresented because there is this multi-billion-dollar industry that profits from these men ruining their lives. It's primarily men. And because I know there are going to be addicts who are going to be extremely offended by this video, I do not refer to Twitch streamers who make millions of dollars from being gamers. Because one thing that makes me very angry before I close this video is that people are going to say, yeah, but so-and-so is on Twitch and he makes $2 million a month and you're nothing. Yeah, sure. And the chances of you becoming that are less than winning the lottery or being stricken by a thunderbolt. So I'm really tired of these fat, bald men who are led well into their 40s and they're soon taking their gaming career off the ground, and then they expect women to act as their mom. I'm not cooking food for a gamer, I'm not cleaning after a gamer, I'm not emptying peace bottles for a gamer, and I don't want people who have the personality of a cardboard box in my life. That you don't realize it, but it is a subculture. You only talk about the game, it's not interesting to anyone else besides the people who are also playing the game. And essentially, you don't deserve to have a girlfriend or a wife. That's what I think. If you're going to be physically present but emotionally absent and deaf and screaming in your headphones at your teammates who are also losers like you 24/7, I don't have time for you. So if you are watching me and you are a woman, add this to the #1 red flag. I mean, okay, #1 should be abusing animals, children, being a human trafficker, being a serial killer, but #2 should be being a gamer and a meth addict. They're about the same. And if you think you're cool because you're a middle-aged man and you're playing games, you are not. You're an eyesore. Thank you for watching.